Substitute teachers of Reddit. What's the worst thing that's happened while you were subbing? The school caught fire. 24 first graders, and a wall of the building catches fire. Cuts off half the evacuation routes. Everyone is confused and running everywhere. Once we get outside, half the kids are crying hysterically, half are running around like maniacs trying to be firefighters. I have not set food in an elementary school since. As a full-time teacher, I was responsible for a horrible sub day. Family emergency came up and I had to leave unexpectedly midday. No real sub plans in place for the class from heck. TM. The next morning, the note just listed about 4 names, and then there were more, many more, referring to about a dozen serious troublemakers. Ran into the sub as she was going to another teacher's class. She still looked shell-shocked, said it was bad. Those kids, but wouldn't elaborate. From a student. Wasn't intentional, but our disrespect and idiocy caused him to cry. Literally, we ended up having to write letters, apologies, and some essay because our teacher didn't expect the kind of behavior from us. At the time I sort of got a kick out of it, but now it seemed pretty stupid. My contribution to the cause was asking some annoying and stupid questions by raising my hand every 5 seconds. One of my co-workers caught 2 4th grade boys having sex in the bathroom. As it said, if you've been fricked at 4, you've been fricked for life. 2 4th grade boys having sex in the bathroom. What? The first day I subbed for a 4th grade class, I got hit with the info that I had a kid with Tourette's that just picked up a new tic. They didn't go into detail on what it was. I was at my desk and the kid walked by. He leaped like 3 feet in the air and kicked himself in the butt. It really caught me off guard, but none of the kids knew what to think. They all looked at me and the only thing I could think of was get up from my desk, jump up, and kick myself in the butt. They all got up and did it too. Sat down, had a laugh and got back to work. Good on you for dispelling the awkwardness. My first year out of college I had to sub in a class for a DLP program. This is basically kids with Down syndrome, severe autism, CP, DB, etc. Well, there was this one student who had so many disabilities. He was nonverbal, couldn't walk without assistance, and suffered multiple seizures. He also drooled a lot, but was conscious enough to spit it into a spare bottle when sitting at a table. Capital W. You can probably see where this is going, but as an athlete I have become accustomed to drinking water all day. I grabbed a bottle off the table and took a big swig and instantly puked. I had grabbed the wrong bottle by mistake. I drank his spit bottle. It tasted terrible, like watered down, lukewarm, puke broth. It stank, and I went home for the rest of the day. BTW. He thought it was hilarious and laughed the entire time I puked. We had a substitute teacher once. We got him for the first time when I was 8 and we took out our English books and then for 2 hours he ranted about Christopher Columbus instead of us writing imaginative pieces. I got him again when I was 10 and he kept stopping our class and forcing us to play chess. We had him again in the last week before Christmas and we were filling out a superhero book and we had to draw our superheroes. He stopped our class and told us all our drawings were crap and no one had lines across their bodies where trousers meet their tops. Another 2-hour rant ensued. The worst that's ever happened to me was starting particularly strong Braxton Hicks contractions during a fire drill while I was evacuating a group of 6th graders. Scared them silly, but everyone was okay. When I was in 1st grade, a sub we'd had a few times before had a seizure in the classroom, so I'd say that was likely her worst experience while subbing. I'm not a substitute teacher, but in grade 11 a fellow student of mine threw an apple at this sub we had during math class. He got really angry and told that student to go frick himself and to head to the office. Shortly after, the principal and vice principal came and told the substitutes to come out into the hall. I never saw him again. We ended up finishing off the class playing hangman while the vice principal sat in the teacher's desk reading a Time magazine. Weird that teachers get repercussions for this stuff. Like, yeah, there is a limit, but there's also something to be said for teaching kids how real people react to their bulls. Since this is a substitute teacher thread, I would like to take the time to thank the good subs of the world. One of the teacher that left a lasting impression on me was an Englishman who used to cover for my high school French teacher. This guy was amazing. He spoke several languages, and whenever we needed help he was happy and willing to offer it. Not only that, but after giving us whatever assignment our teacher left us, he would engage us in intelligent conversation. The debates we had in his class were always what the entire class looked forward to when he subbed. I found out like a year after graduation that he had died of cancer. R.I.P. Mr. Unger. I'm not a teacher, but a couple of years back, my class was giving a super religious sub a really hard time. She got so frustrated that she went down the rows and insulted each student individually. She also threw a stapler at one kid because he kept making fun of her Jamaican accent. In retrospect, this lady would have probably killed us all if the class period was longer. An 8th grade student had his dong out and was getting a handy from the girl next to him in his Ella class. I wasn't the sub, but I work in the school. Kid gets more action than me. Working as a sub, I was administering an exam when one student threw a note to another student. It flew across several rows of students to the person who had turned around to catch it. Of course, I take the tests of those students when I take the note. Then, I read it. Drug deal. These were 6th graders. This will probably get buried, but oh well. Not mine, but my mom's story. First day as a substitute teacher. All is well until she has to put on a movie for the kids. All but one kid who finished his work from yesterday morning got to watch the movie. He had to sit in the back of the class and finish his coloring project. When she told him this, he took his crayons and threw them all over the floor. After she asked him to pick them up, he sat there saying effing crayons as he put each one in the box. Just after she asked him not to use those words. It was a 2nd grade class after all. He flipped over his desk and walked out the door. She then called the office and watched him walk to the end of the hallway and jump the fence and leave campus. The office said they would send someone after him and call the police. Apparently it happened pretty often with this kid. Probably would have been nice to let the sub know that beforehand. TLDR. Kids got problems. I'm not a sub, but that's how Reddit works, right? But anyways, when I was a freshman in high school, our English class had a long-term sub because our teacher had twins. The class before my hour was brutal. They would shoot spitballs at her and all over the ceiling. They wouldn't do anything she told them to and would verbally harass her. She would just sit at her desk and cry. Our class gave her a yardstick to hit on the desk to make people shut up, but she was a sweet old lady and never did it. When our teacher finally came back, she said our school was so horrible and vowed never to come back. I haven't seen her since. My first day substituting ever. 3rd grade. In the morning, right after the bell, right before roll call, the whole class screaming and running around. A little girl stands next to me while I'm trying to make sense of the desk. Miss, can I turn in my homework? Miss flustered with my new duties. I ask her to please wait a moment. She continues to plead with me. Another kid comes to the desk. Miss, I gotta go to the bath. Strawberries and oatmeal and orange juice all over Emmy and little overachieving girl while she screams and cries at the top of her lungs. Did I mention I bath when I see bath? I was subbing for a 7th grade math teacher. The students were supposed to be taking a skills assessment on the computers. These tests weren't going to go against their grades or anything. They were just to identify areas where students needed help. So, I quickly noticed that a large amount of students were on Facebook, Twitter. I went up to each kid individually and asked them to just finish the test before they went on Facebook, even if they just blew through it without trying. One student apparently didn't like this and punched me in the back when I turned around. I have osteoarthritis in my back, so this pretty much took me right out of the game. I ended up having to take a week off of subbing and my night job to recover. Definitely wasn't worth the $80. Last week I had a student come up to me at my desk during carpet time. She shoved her hand in my face and this foul smell came from her. She tells me look, I quickly push my chair away from her and ask her what was on her hand and she laughs and says poop. I ask her how that happened and she said she got it from another student. Finally she fessed up that she had put her hand down her pants after she crap herself. BC she wanted to know what it felt like to touch poop. I could write a book with all the stories I have from subbing. Not a substitute story, but my mom teaches 4th grade. Had a boy in her class that was very aggressive, violent. Had a parent-teacher conference. The boy's mom said he was in a war in his past life and that was why he was violent. She was serious. About a month ago, I had a student ask to go to bathroom. We had like 5 minutes left, so I was like, please wait. He kept bothering me and I said to wait until the class was over. He said in the most calm, collected, Hannibal Lecter voice, I'm going to find out where you live, kill you in your sleep, and then burn your house down. It came completely out of the blue. Everybody in the class was completely shocked. I was at a loss. I said, hold that thought, and then pressed the emergency call button. The school cop took him out of school and I had to file all this paperwork. I even got a special escort of security guards that took me out to my car after school. I ended up driving all over the city, in full panic mode, making sure I wasn't being followed. Then the next week, I had a couple of boys who kept taking videos of me on Vine and tracking me down on Twitter and Facebook. It was at a different school, but I asked the secretary if she could get one of the deans to have them take the videos down. I really didn't care except what had happened with the death threat. I was keeping a low profile. That next week, I found out that all of them had gotten the same punishment. 10 days expelled, in-school suspension, and then behavior school. I tried to get the boys that filmed me out of some of it because it was overkill, but they decided it was stalking and cyberbullying. The one that gave me the death threat, I had to force them to report it to the real cops so there would be a record. TLDR. I got death threats and stalked. The job really sucks. My sister substitutes at the worst school in Denmark. It's official. She busted 2 of her students stealing wheels off of bicycles while smoking cigarettes just outside the classroom. When she confronted them, they said that they were going to murder her if she told anyone. They were 1st graders. When I was in 4th grade, a kid in my class, who 2 years prior had gotten expelled for trying to strangle a teacher, and then was readmitted the next year, gave another kid the finger, which in retrospect isn't terrible, but when you're 10 it's like the end of the world. Anyways, the kid he gave the finger to told the sub, and instead of punishing the student who gave him the finger, the teacher proceeded to walk up to the victim, give him the finger and say, is this physically hurting you? No. So be quiet, and throw a desk across the classroom. We didn't see him much after that. Role reversal. I have a neurological disorder, Tourette syndrome, and once a sub asked the whole class if I was retarded. My best was subbing for a 12th grade physics class. I'm a 22-year-old short male. I look like I'm 16 years old, so this class is packed, maybe a bit under 40 students. Many of them were football players, tall, many of them black, and big. So class starts and I hand out the work the teacher left. Bunch of busy work no one did. A group of about 5 or 6 of these football players move their desks around and take a small corner of the room. As I'm walking around seeing what's going on, I find that these students had set up a small gambling ring. They each had a few stacks of ones and were throwing dice and bills were getting passed around. I went on to tell them to do their work, which no one did, and apparently should have been more careful because some student came up to me later and told me that those guys looked like they were about to jump me. Same class later in the day, a student nonchalantly smoked some weed and hid it in his jacket as I came by. Not a single person in either class said anything about these events. I have a feeling it's normal at that school. I'm no substitute, but I do remember some pretty strange subs I had throughout elementary school. The strangest out of all of them would have to the sub I had in 1st grade that tried to convince us that our parents were evil. It was around Christmas time, and our normal teacher was reading us all these Christmas stories like the Polar Express, The Night Before Christmas, Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, etc. So we were obviously pumped for Christmas and full of holiday spirit. Well, The next day our teacher was sick and called in a sub. The sub seemed normal at first. She called roll, introduced herself, got to know a few of the students, and all of that jazz. She then moved on to the first activity of the day, read the class a story from our Christmas book. She grabbed the book, stared at it for a bit, then looked up at us and said something along the lines of, "Did you know Santa isn't real? Your parents are lying to you, and I can't believe you little brats trust your parents this much." We all looked at each other in horror. The class just sat in silence as she went on about how our parents were evil and lied to us all the time and that they didn't actually love us. This went on for a few hours, but luckily it was a short day, so we all got picked up at around 12:30 or so. She sent a lot of kids home crying and dead inside, including me. Obviously there were a ton of complaints from the parents and she was never heard of again. If I remember correctly, there was a news article in the newspaper about it. I usually hate when people do this, but the story is too good not to tell. My freshman year in high school I was struggling in Spanish class. It was the last day before spring break and the sub was just out of college. At our high school we had a built-in sort of instant messaging system called a NetSend. This could be native to Ms. I have no clue. It was very similar to email except that sending a message would create a pop-up that brought itself to the front of the screen. This is important later on in the story. I was a young naive freshman, the class clown. It wasn't uncommon for me to get in small stupid bits of trouble. The substitute teacher was hanging out in her office when I heard two upperclassmen sitting at the computer directly behind me talking about some sort of code they figured out in regards to our NetSend system. All I heard was, "If you hit the enter button, this will go out to every computer on campus." Before I could think, I turned around and slammed my finger on the button waiting for a funny reaction from the guys. Turns out I just sent a direct message to all 9,000 accounts on our school's network that politely said "frick you be." The sub found out and decided that it would be best to lock the classroom door, unplug the computer, and box it up in her office. It took 2 minutes for Digital Phil, the computer tech, to bust in the room and ask about what happened. We were caught, but we had no idea of the fallout. NetSends apparently can't be erased, so I heard about people logging into their account months later being welcomed with a nice "frick you be." A 5th grade classroom was watching a PowerPoint slideshow during the send and I'm sure that went well. One of the teachers everyone hated thought that we sent it only to her and left school because of an emotional breakdown. I ended up lucky with only a 1-day suspension since I didn't really know what I was doing. TLDR. Sent an IM to all 9,000 faculty and students at my high school saying "frick you be." Sub tried to cover it up, was never seen at school again. Hopefully there's some heroes who thought I knew because I'm late. My friend pretended to be blind. All class kids were helping him out with simple tasks: reading, walking, going to the bathroom. Anyways, he ended up playing tag and sprinted straight into the whiteboard, causing his head to crack. And the board. Funniest class ever. He ended up having to pay for his minor concussion and the board. No other disciplinary action than that though. A year one walked in with his own poop in his hand saying, "Look at this," while I had the rest of the class on the carpet. The smell met us before he did. Chaos ensued. I once had a 4-year-old who wouldn't sleep for nap time. I would put his mat away from the other kids so at least they could sleep. One day he stood up, started running around the classroom in Timberland boots, stomping all over the place. He took one girl's blanket and started spinning it around his head, threw it, jumped on top of another little girl and started kissing her on the mouth. She starts crying. I'm trying to pull this kid off but he had a death grip on her mat. I had to use my cell to call for help. I once organized the entire class to revolt, having everyone begin coughing at exactly 11:37. It was super effective. The substitute lost all confidence and the class was relatively unproductive for the next week. The teacher was on leave for something, and it didn't even backfire. The teacher ended up bribing us with donuts to not do it again. My wife subbed in a class where one kid started farting on the other kids, said that if Martin Luther King was still alive he'd start him on fire, and then when she sent him to the office, she had to hold the door closed because he kept trying to force his way back in. This, of course, was in middle school. One of my very good friends, Brian, was substitute teaching an AP chemistry class. One student said, "Hey, you look like a M addict. We should cook him," which I would assume is because he looks old despite his somewhat mid-age. He has been smoking cigarettes since 13. Brian didn't take this well because his mom had a serious M problem when he was a kid. He went over to the kid's desk, slammed his fist down on desk and told him to talk to him in the hall. He left the door wide but open so all the other students could hear what he was saying. He told him off pretty well from what I remember. Brian started to cry halfway through it and nearly choked him. He went back to his desk and sobbed until one student got up and comforted him. The kid that he yelled at walked back into the classroom after he was done crying, in which Brian gave him 3 detentions. Then that kid started to cry. He subbed the rest of that year and found out half the class beat the crap out of him at the end of the year because they found out about Brian's mom. Sometimes there are good people. Something like this happened to my old high school's tech guy. He went to get a student out of class and the sub wouldn't let him and kept asking why he was out of class until the vice principal had to come in and prove he was both an adult and a staff member. As a student, a substitute I had, Mr. Richard, told a very weird story that happened to him about 3 years ago. At the school Mr. Richard was subbing in, they had recently enforced a policy where the students could not leave the class for any reason as to not disrupt the lesson. Well, this one boy, Tyler, asks to get to the bathroom. Mr. Richard explained the new rule and said he was sorry, but Tyler could not go to the bathroom until class was over. So, Tyler explains he has to take a dump right now. But Mr. Richard was not allowed to let him leave, so he again apologized and sent Tyler to sit down. Well, Tyler turns around, faces the class, and his face starts turning red. After a few seconds or so, Tyler shakes a lump of crap out of his pants, then sat back down like nothing happened. We had an older math teacher in 7th grade who got sick and went on extended leave. The sub told us she had died. When Mrs. Horvath showed back up, we were shocked. She was P when we told her of her passing, and the sub never returned. This happened when we had a sub. My friend Jacob was eating in class and dropped some of his chips on the floor, so he goes to the janitor's closet, grabs a broom, sweeps up everything, and when he was done he violently swung the broom handle around, like a flag twirler, and hit this kid right in the nose, causing him to bleed. Blood was everywhere and it was dripping fast. It was all over his desk, his worksheet, and the floor. The sub was on the computer and wasn't paying any attention. We were like, "Miss, he's bleeding." She turned around and lost her crap. I escorted him to the nurse and Jacob got ISS. We had a drama class where the teacher gave us a heads up on a day she would be gone, so we plotted out our own sub. When the substitute showed up for our class, in walked one of our students who then explained he was a special sub in just for our class. Took over, called roll, and taught the class for the rest of the hour. Mild stuff, I know, but it was fun pulling one over on the substitute, but still getting stuff done. In another class, we had an arrogant prick come in as sub, so we started just doing our own thing and ignoring him. Was a work on your own project, not much instruction needed art class. Eventually the sullen attitude from most of the students during the day caused him to flip out. Then when the VP came to check up on what was going on, the sub flipped out on him too. We never saw the guy again, apparently lost his right to sub in our entire district. Apparently we were mild-mannered sociopaths at least. Riot on the soccer field was probably the worst thing that happened when I was subbing. Very low income middle school and there were 4 8th grade classes. Probably about 120 kids on the field at the end of the day and 4 subs to supervise. Teachers were all at a meeting about the school being shut down. Some kids tried to ditch before the bell rang, so one of the other subs tried to close the gates. Kids went nuts and started banging the gate and climbing the fence. Couple kids got knocked down and nearly trampled before I yelled at the dumbass, who was physically holding the gate closed, to open the goddamn gate before someone was hurt and let security deal with it. Not a teacher, but a student at the time. Have you seen those glass desk covers? Well, when I was in the 4th grade we had a substitute teacher that got really angry and banged on the desk, breaking the glass. That ought to shut us all up. I am not a sub, but back in elementary school, my 5th grade class made our teacher and 3 subs cry. We were bad children. 7th grade, rich white neighborhood. Third period about 30 seconds after break. Rich white B. Can I go to the bathroom? Me. Number. You just came in from break. RWB. But I have to change my tampon. Me. Then you can change it in the office bathroom with while you're in there with your referral. I turn to get a referral from the substitute folder and a large eraser flies past my head. Rich kids are the worst. I had the manliest sub ever last year. He looked a bit like Harrison Ford, think the fourth Indiana Jones when he was a teacher, and Liam Neeson. There was this kid in my class, sophomore in high school, who is just generally racist and says the most obscene phrases at the most inappropriate times. This kid starts spouting off at another guy, calling him a B and telling him you won't do anything, you know, stupid teenager things. Well, needless to say, one of the fellows in my class finally had enough and gets up, throws this kid's crap everywhere and starts screaming, hit me, and the other kid mumbles, well, I don't want to get in trouble, so just calmly walked over and said something to the effect of, if you're going to start crap, first off take it outside, and second don't be a little bee needles to say this buster doesn't pop off at people anymore. I remember when I was in the 6th grade and some of my classmates and I got an eyeful when the sub didn't realize the barn door was open. Also, the guy liked going commando. Ugh. Not a teacher, I'm a parent. Went in to volunteer in my daughter's 2nd grade class and there was a sub. B told the entire class that there was no Santa. First day subbing at problem school. Walked in confident and fresh, wearing a nice shirt and tie. 45 minutes later I'm sitting in the office covered in some kid's blood giving a detailed report to the police. I'm no longer interested in teaching. Story time. Not a sub, but I had a sub in 7th or 8th grade shop class, and it might have been his worst day. He looked like Mr. Bean, and we called him that behind his back. Little did we know his actions would fit his appearance. I was making a baseball bat on the lathe. I had just started in the previous period, so it was still rough. He came over and decided that he wanted to have a go for some reason. Without explaining himself, he just took the chisel from me and stood in front of the lathe. I guess he'd never used one before, because he decided the best course of action was to jam the chisel right into the 3-foot-long piece of ash spinning at 1,600 revolutions per minute or however fast it goes. Well, the tool shoots out of his hand and the bat gets torn off the lathe and goes flying up and hit him right in the chest and face. Myself and all the other kids just kinda stared at him wide-eyed with shock before the giggles kicked in once we realized he wasn't seriously injured. He collected himself, sat down behind his desk, and never touched another power tool the rest of the time he was subbing. I don't know what he was used to teaching, but it was obvious that it wasn't wood shop. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.